Ladies and gentlemen, Seahawks fans of all ages, welcome back to 12 Talk Podcast. Coming to you on YouTube only at the moment because we can't access RX. So that's the reason why we've been quite quiet. You'll notice that we have an extra person here with us. We are joined by the fantastic Mr. Dan Viens of Seahawks Forever. How are you doing, sir?
Where's he? Where's the fantastic one? It's always great to be with you guys.
It's a pleasure having you. I mean, we are going to be running through our 12 talking points of the Seahawks overtime victory against the Patriots. There are some fantastic bits we've all got here. Any of you that tuned in last week with Jackson, you'll know exactly what we're going to be going through. We've got some questions from the Discord as well. But before we get started, as always, we are the official podcast of the UK Seahawkers. If you are not a member and you want to join, by all means, join. It's £12 for the year for one person, £20 for a family membership. You get all these benefits and goodies, including these goodies. Here you go. You get your membership card, your RFD card this year, throwback patch, and your wristband, which you'll get annually. And also a shout out to our friends at the German Seahawkers, which you can join for €15 approximately, and the exchange rates will probably change. £12.68 or $16.06. And there are some of the fantastic German Seahawkers there. That was at their most recent meetup. I've got quite a good show in there. I think the UK Seahawkers, we need to do a bit more for our next showing. And as always, we're presented to you by Wraith Energy. If you do want to try Wraith Energy, there you go. There's Mitch with his nice bottle. That's it. There you go. A bit of product placement. If you use the code 12Talk at checkout, you'll get 10% off any order. And again, this stuff keeps me and Mitch awake and ready to do this pod and watch these games at late nights.
That stuff looks legit. I might have to give that a try. I love a good energy drink.
Dude, I'm the same. It's the fact because it's not laced with every other chemical you get from some other brands.
I don't even care about that. Does it work? You know,
it does. Yeah. That's the main thing.
And labels anymore.
True.
That's it. And as
everything
we said,
will kill you.
I've lived this long, so.
As we said in our last pod as well, we have teamed up with the Robin Cancer Trust. They are our nominated charity for the season. So any proceeds that come to our pod, 25% of those proceeds go to the Robin Cancer Trust to help with their life-saving campaigns. Just to give you some little insights there, you've got the Talking Bollocks campaign, which is all about testicular cancer awareness. And then you've got your Not Overreacting. So with that, gentlemen, I think we should hit that theme music and get into this.
Let's do it.
There we go. Straight into it. Dan, how is everything? We've not said hello properly. How's everything going? Obviously, we know the channel's going amazingly because, well, we are avid watchers and listeners as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's going great. You know, it's the Seahawks are 2-0, and all of a sudden they're everybody's darling. You know, I wake up this morning to people talking about Geno Smith nationwide and how good he's been and how Mike McDonald's legitimate and how the NFC West might be up for grabs. So it's a good day. Yeah. And it's always good to chat with you guys.
Yeah, it's great having you on. Obviously, we know you're a very busy man today as well. So shall we get into this? Because yesterday's game was, in my view, a typical Seahawks game where you had such high expectations and then the fourth quarter came and you were puckering and you didn't know what was going to happen. And I think everyone on X, on any bit of social media, even your friends if they're Seahawks fans, probably had the exact same reaction. So we had the Seahawks win 23-20 in overtime. Jason Myers coming through for us, which is so nice to say because there's been times where I've been skeptical.
It was a little too close for my liking. from that straight on angle, man, he just hugged that thing just inside the left upright, gave us a couple of seconds of chagrin. Yeah, that was it's not over till it's over, but and it wouldn't have been over at that moment still, but that was a clutch kick. And I thought really, and this was something, we're going to talk all season about things that we see that are different, right, than what we might have seen before. And each week gives us more evidence of how Mike Macdonald and Pete Carroll are similar and how they're different. And we saw some game and clock management stuff this week. But even in that decision where there was plenty of time, obviously, I think it was like 4 or 5 minutes left in overtime, right? Yeah. And instead of, some teams will kick on third down in the event that if you muff the snap, you still get one more down to try and kick it. He was just like, hey, we feel good about Jason. We feel good about where we're at. Let's not risk a turnover. And to kick it on second down when they were moving the football, I thought was really interesting. Just another thing that I think we wouldn't have seen previously.
It's so nice to see that confidence as well, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, Jason Myers, I know people and some people that do what all of us do, and some people in the media or whatever, and certainly a lot of fans that think that, we shouldn't be paying him $5 million a year and that he's not trustworthy. But I think if you went back and looked over his career, there have been a couple of hiccups, but that happens to all kickers. It's happening to Justin Tucker right now, for goodness sakes, even in Baltimore, maybe the best kicker of all time. But over the course of his career, he's been really, really solid, and he's usually come through in those moments. He's missed a few, but I wasn't that nervous heading into it.
It could have been worse. We could have had a Blair Walsh waiting in the wings to come and take that kick. So
Blair will never live it down. I was at that. His worst moment as a Seahawk had to have been. No. I'm sorry. That was Stephen Hauschka still. It was his last year. I was just going to say I was at that 3-3 or was it a 6-6 tie in Arizona several years ago. But I'm sorry. I got off the point there. I thought
that's fine.
That was
yeah. I mean, to be honest, when you look at the we said this on a previous pod, the plethora of substandard kickers that we've had, Jason Myers, I think, is a good option. Like I said, if you look through his career, he's actually been clutch at the right time. He has missed kicks, but no one is automatic. No one's 100% in that situation.
Yeah.
And for this, I think that's exactly what we needed. We are 2-0. Let's go through the box score quickly, and then we'll go on to our 12 talking points.
Yeah.
So the first quarter, 7-7, it was the first quarter with a DK touchdown, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You could tell I was tired. It had been a long week for me, but that was just to take the top off the defense like that and really utilize, and it's one of my talking points for later, the confusion when we're moving around our formation to start with. Fantastic. Second quarter, I thought we might be able to seal this in the second half. 6 points to the Patriots, 10 to the Seahawks, and then a scoreless third.
Yeah.
Which,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, which I thought was completely against the run of play. I thought we would have put our foot on the throat and carried on going there.
Yeah, that was interesting, especially the way the first half ended, right? With, defense gets a stop, actually holds a couple of stops, holds into a field goal on one drive when it looked like they were really getting their running game going, and then we get the other stop with a minute left that allows us enough time to go down and kick a field goal, and that's where we saw some really cool sort of game management decisions by Mike Macdonald and his staff, and the thinking there was, okay, now you try to double up, right? They deferred after winning the opening toss, and so they get the ball to start the second half. And you like to see them come out like they did last week and move the ball right away in the second half. And they didn't really, 10 plays, 45 yards. They turn it over on downs after the fourth down call. Took them a while to get going, but I'm with you. That probably was the point in the game where I was the most nervous, was early third quarter. They were still running the football. Seahawks offense couldn't really get on track. And there was a point where I had not resigned myself to, but just, understood that this is still an evolution, and there's still some growing to be done. Mike Macdonald talked a lot in those types of terms this morning on his local radio coaches show about, hey, we're still figuring this out. We're still installing things. We're still learning each other and what we're good at. And you see that even throughout the course of a game sometimes. And I thought, okay, you know what? There's going to be games we lose that we don't think we should have. There are going to be games along the way, I think, that we win that might be a surprise. Maybe this is one of those games that ends up being a learning point, and that we chalk up as an L, but we learn from it and grow from it. And then they come back and get the win. So you get to learn and win at the same time, which is always the best thing.
Yeah, I think that's a double bonus, really, because not only did we come away with the win, but we had a lot of teaching tape moving forward. And there was an awful lot of that for the offense in game one as well, especially the O-line. And there's been, I feel like we've taken our lumps over the first two games, but we've come out of it 2-0 and top of the division. And we're playing, I don't want to call the Dolphins a beaten up team, but there is a player removed from that is a key player,
sure,
that won't be playing. So that's and they're built around that offense. I mean, they're very offense heavy, and they've lost the orchestrator, of that offense. So we could go 3-0, having not played a complete game of football on offense or defense in any one. And I thought the really interesting thing was the fact that the defense bailed out the offense in game one. I feel like the offense bailed out the defense in this game. So both sides of the ball have shown the grit and the determination, and that they have the quality to carry the team, in two very different games. That's really reassuring for me.
Just imagine when they both come together.
Exactly.
They both have that complete game.
And that was my biggest, I think, overall kind of 360-degree view takeaway of this game coming out of it is, and it was a piece of sound I played on my reaction show last night with McDonald talking just in really transparent, blatant terms, which I really have come to love about him, about how, look, not every game's going to be perfect. Sometimes the offense carries you, sometimes the defense does, and sometimes you have to pick each other up. Sometimes things don't work, like the running game doesn't work, so you have to throw the football, and you got to just find a way to win at the end of the day. And it's not about how perfect it is. And I thought that kind of mentality is something that the really good teams have. Case in point, back-to-back Super Bowl champion, Kansas City Chiefs, ugly as hell yesterday. By all rights, should have lost that game in some people's eyes, but yet they find a way to win because they've been there, done that, and they've gone through those situations, but they just did enough to pick each other up to ultimately get the result at the end.
And then now without Pacheco, aren't they?
Yeah. The injuries are starting to pile up around the league. The Seahawks have had a few minor ones, fortunately nothing serious yet, but even around the NFC West, all sorts of injuries starting to pile up.
You didn't draft McCaffrey in our league, did you?
In the best ball league.
Best ball league, yeah. I
did, yeah. But I won week one without him. Week two, it doesn't look like it's going my way. Although I've got some guys going tonight. But yeah, that's the interesting thing. I didn't have him. I don't have him in any of my other 4 leagues, but in a best ball league, you can kind of withstand that a little bit.
Yeah,
it's kind of fun.
Yeah. And then just to get through on the fourth quarter, we let the Pats back in the game with a converted touchdown, and we managed to get the 3. Then overtime hit, and the Patriots started with the ball, and we withstood that to then bring it back down the field and to let Jason Myers kick the field goal to win 23-20. With that, gentlemen, for those of you who didn't watch our show last week, now apologies again, this isn't on X because we're having some issues with them at the moment, but I will repost this. We go through 12 talking points. Each of us are going to pick 4, and we'll have a chat about it. By all means, if you're watching, get in the comments, let us know. But as is customary, Dan, as our exalted guest here, would you like to start with your 4? You can start one at a time.
Yeah, how'd you come up with that number 12, first of all?
That's serendipitous. What can I say?
Let me go back to my notes here. Hold on. It's early here. It's early. It's noon, but that's kind of early for me. So number 1, even though the numbers aren't sterling, right? He's not jumping off the stat page. He's not doing Aiden Hutchinson type things. I think seeing Derek Hall blossom before our eyes is one of the most fun things of these first two games. And really not just the first two games. We saw it all throughout the preseason. There were times where he was our best edge player. Of course, Boye Mafe wasn't getting as many snaps in the preseason. But, you know, a guy that I coming out of college, I didn't spend a lot of time focusing on in the pre-draft process. He didn't really seem to fit the profile I thought the Seahawks were looking for. He's not the twitchy type. He's more of a power-based player. Yeah. Then you get to know the player, you get to know the person in the background, you root for him even more. And he just, you know, never really had a chance to establish much last year. He had a shoulder injury he was nursing throughout much of it. That power and speed to power and that athletic profile and just how hard he plays is starting to show up in games. And at a time when the Seahawks need it most, because obviously with Uchenna Nwosu being out, not sure how much longer that's going to be. Now, Boye Mafe bangs his knee yesterday. Doesn't sound too serious, but he had to come out late in that game. You know, they're relying on Derek Hall more than ever. And there were some plays where he didn't get a stat for it, but he absolutely beat his guy or blew up the edge to influence a run play or to get pressure on Jacoby Brissett. And I think he's kind of where Boye Mafe was last year, where things are slowing down for him. And he's taking that next step. And I think we're seeing the Seahawks once again cashing in on a second-round draft pick at edge. And I think he's turning into a guy that's going to be a foundational player on that defense.
Couldn't agree more. We're very high on Derek Hall on this pod. Mitch was he was very forward in sending me a lot of clips when he was coming out of the draft, saying how much I love him, just purely due to that power to speed rush and the long arms, just the way in which he can move a tackle. Just completely wrong footing them and then using that power just to drive them back and collapse the pocket. I've been so impressed with him so far, and I'm really hoping for a breakout as well.
Yeah.
Mitch,
I had a little worried yesterday because he had to leave for a bit too. Mm-hmm. Yesterday, there was a moment he went in the tent. And I think they evaluated him for a concussion, and I thought, oh, geez, man, we're going to be down to, you know, we're going to see Travis Gibson out here. But yeah, he was able to come back in the game, and good thing he did because he made some key plays down the stretch.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Dan, a lot of the hard work and the success he has off his edge results in stat line for other people. I mean, we've just finished a game where Williams and Murphy shared 2 sacks. You know, you don't get those sacks in the interior if you can't set an edge. You know, especially if you've got a mobile quarterback that is trying to escape the pocket. You know, so. Yeah. I think that really speaks to how well he's setting the edge in Nwosu's absence.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and again, I can't emphasize enough like how if you put a draft grade on the quality of a person, he's a 10. He's a 10 on your draft board.
Every time. Fantastic story and turning into a great player. If we can have him and Boye Mafe as our edges for the future, I will be happy.
Yeah.
But I think Mitch alluded to Williams and Murphy getting a combined 2 sacks, which I think leads on to your next point perfectly, Dan.
Yeah, my next talking point, I worded it, you know, learning curve for Byron Murphy, ? And the reason is because I feel like we've seen this already with McDonald. We saw it early on when he was hired with Devin Witherspoon. He's harder on the guys that he expects more out of, right? And he sees superstar potential in Devin Witherspoon. He sees superstar potential in Byron Murphy. He's been a little slow to praise Murphy in cases where, you know, in the past, you know, Pete Carroll might have heaped praise on a young guy, but then we wouldn't see that put into practice. It wouldn't equate to number of reps, right, or usage or role on the field. Byron Murphy's obviously playing a very important role in that defensive line rotation. But after the game, McDonald said, somebody asked him about Murphy's performance, and he said, I don't know. I don't know. I'm going to have to look at the tape. The run defense wasn't good enough. He didn't pin it all on Byron, but he wasn't quick. He wasn't just going to heap praise on him. Now, you know, today, all the grades come out and everything else, and Murphy was one of the highest graded defensive tackles in the league in pass rush win rate. And there's some moments on film that I don't necessarily really notice live, but then you see it on film and where he impacted plays. So it's a little bit of what you expect from most rookies early in their career. there's some really, really great moments, and then there's some moments where maybe he takes himself out of the play. But also, I'll say this: 2 games into his pro career, and Byron Murphy's, even though he's playing next to Leonard Williams and Jaron Reed and Jonathan Hankins, some really, really well-established vets, he's getting a lot of double teams. And, I haven't seen any of those numbers. I'm sure there's stats out there somewhere about how often a guy is double teams. But it seems like, and maybe it's just the nature of his position, like, these plays, it's just, we're double teaming the nose, and that's where he's lining up a lot of the times. But it seems like he's getting a lot of attention with 2 guys at a time, and we even saw that in the preseason. So teams are certainly aware of him.
Yeah, I agree. I really enjoy listening to Mike McDonald talking. Whenever anyone asks him a question about Murphy, like I said, he's not quite dismissive, but he is so reluctant to give all the praise and all the hype to him. Yeah. But it's from a coaching point of view, you don't want to blow smoke up someone too early. And we see all the Instagram posts of him with the chains and the teeth and the Bugatti or whatever he's driving, the Bentley. And part of the coaching for a young player like that, who has been drafted so highly, who is thought of so highly around the league, is that you need to bring them down to earth and keep them grounded. And I think part of what he's doing is that. It's the, look, Rook, you've not achieved anything yet, so I'm not going to talk like you have.
Yeah.
But I think hopefully that will drive him more. It sort of becomes that sort of praise kink where he wants that pat on the back, and it will drive him to do more and more.
And interestingly enough, I can share this insight, because I see the same stuff. Byron is living a very flashy outward life so far, living his best life as a rookie. But I've had an opportunity to meet him a couple of times in person and interact with him, and he's kind of shy at first. And then once he opens up a little bit and talks, he's very, very humble, very, very sweet, and kind of I would qualify him as laid back. So it doesn't really match up with the persona you expect when you see the image someone's presenting on social media. So important lesson for us all. But I just think it all just speaks to, everything that I can find out about this guy and what the coaches have said about him. And we know the Seahawks draft history and the type of players that they target, that we know that this guy is passionate about football and cares about football and wants to be great. And that's the bottom line.
That's what we want.
Nice.
Mitch, have you got anything you want to add about Murphy? I know you watch him with interest every game.
Yeah, I do. And he excites me a lot. And I think the double teams and the system are kind of, I feel like they're both are prohibiting factors currently. But I think as he settles into this system, because this system won't be like something he played in college. Mike Mack systems are just unique to him. So I think there's going to be a certain amount of versatility along that line he needs to learn. Situationally, he'll get better. And I think the NFL level will slow down for him as well. So there's a bunch of things there that are in his favor in the long term. One thing from the last game was I love how quickly he got off a double team block to stuff that run. Because you can see so much see so much tape in college of him doing that, and he was so good at it. So to have done that at this level in game 1, that's a great building block. Building block. So yeah, your point was that the learning curve, and I think there's plenty of learning going on at real time in games. By the end of the season, I expect him to have really kicked on.
He's always winning in leverage, and I don't think there's a rep on tape yet, at least not one that I've seen, where he gets knocked off his feet. He's always kind of asserting himself and moving forward, and the hands and the feet all seem to match up. He's a fun player, and I think those big games are going to come. I think he's going to have a couple 2-sack games. I think he's going to have a couple of big highlights along the way. But in the meantime, he's making some things easier for other people. Leonard Williams has one of the highest pass rush win rates in the league right now among interior linemen. Boye Mafe is number 2 in the league behind Aiden Hutchinson in total pressures, even though he missed most of the fourth quarter yesterday. So he's creating opportunities for other guys, which is what you want from your interior guys.
Williams is at 5 at the moment, isn't he?
Pardon me?
On pressures. Williams is at 5. So you've got Mafe at 2, and I'm pretty sure Williams was at 5. I read that earlier.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I mean, if we move off the defense, because as we said, the offense saved us in this, and I think this comment from our friend True Drew Sports leads very well into what you're going to be talking about. How are you liking Grubb's play calling?
Just my third talking, but just go look at go to Next Gen Stats. Anyone can access this on ESPN, and look at his passing chart, Geno Smith's passing chart from yesterday. And for all of the complaints, concerns we've had over the years with it was a big issue with Russell Wilson, didn't use the middle of the field enough. Well, was that his height or was it the play calling? It was a knock from some people on Ryan Grubb coming out of UW. Michael Penix didn't use the middle of the field a whole lot. Was that Grubb or was that Penix? Or was that just that they had those weapons and they just had mismatches on the outside and that's what they went to? When you look at Geno Smith's pass chart yesterday, it's every layer, every section of the field is tested. And I made the analogy yesterday on my show and again today of it's like I almost feel like, and this is just a visceral kind of a gut feeling. It's nothing that I can back up with analytical numbers or anything like that, like some people like to do, but it just feels like almost on a play to play basis throughout the game, Grubb is trying to find ways. He's just poking. He's poking. He's trying to find advantages and your disadvantages and your weakness. And then once he finds it, then he's going to keep going to it. And while also keeping in mind what his team is good at and not. And even though the offensive line held up across the board better yesterday, and actually their numbers kind of on the aggregate league-wide are sort of middle of the pack for the most part. They're kind of between 15 and 20 as far as offensive line and pressures allowed. I think that first quarter against Denver kind of stands out, and then just some of the individual plays stick out. But as a whole, they were better yesterday. But still, the adjustment so far is we're getting rid of the ball quick, and we're gonna throw it short if we have to. We're gonna take deep shots, which he does. He tries to stress every level of the defense. There was a shot to DK in the third quarter where he was covered perfectly by Gonzalez, but he still gave him a shot. And I think those are important. And I'm not sure that some of our past offensive coordinators did that consistently enough. There it is. I think 21 here. I have the stat here. 28 of his 31 passes were under 10 air yards. And he got the ball off in week 1 in 2.5 seconds, third fastest time for him since 2019. So that's the adjustment they're making, is get rid of the ball quick, spread the ball all around to all of our weapons, to every level of the field, so the defense is stressed at all those points. And I absolutely love it. And Geno, we heard about it in training camp. We heard about it all through OTAs, that this is like a fish to water with the match between he and Grubb and how they see the game and Grubb's system and what he can get out of a quarterback. And we're seeing it, man. I mean, Geno was on it yesterday. And I think it's because Grubb kind of laid out the red carpet for him and said, here's the way we're going to succeed. And we're seeing it. Yeah. That's a great passing chart. We're seeing run after the catch as well. And that's something that we haven't seen a lot of in the past. We're seeing DK getting opportunities on crossing routes, JSN getting the ball while he's moving, and putting guys in a position to make plays after the catch as well.
It was. I mean, we've said it on this pod, and I think most Seahawks fans and podcasts have said it. The issue that I had personally with the last couple of seasons of Waldron was that there weren't enough levels to the plays. So it was, your read is here, everyone is at the exact same distance from the line of scrimmage, or you might get one person running a go route, and that is it. Whereas when you look at the games now, with Grubb calling this, there are so many options for Geno to throw to at different levels where he can then test the coverage and test the defense. I think this chart speaks verses for that. I'm watching yesterday, just the receptions that were over the middle, that JSN ball, which was just on a rope. The ball to DK for the touchdown. All of this was just brilliant to see. This excites me for the rest of the season. If you can keep doing this and keep progressing, obviously with the future installs that are going to be coming as well, when K9 comes back, opens up more for us as well.
Yeah, and I have been just wishing and hoping upon a dream for the last 10 years that we would have an offensive coordinator like we see some of the other really good ones in the league, be able to scheme guys open, and I thought if we could ever get one of those, that it would really unlock DK Metcalf, because, some people criticize him for not being able to really create separation in a one-on-one press man matchup. He's a very physical receiver, and he can beat you for the contested catch, but he doesn't create a lot of his own separation. That's never been his game. It's why he slipped to the end of the second round. It's never going to be his game. But if you play to his strengths, he can have the most monster year of his career, which I think we're seeing maybe he's on the way to doing. And I think yesterday was a great example. They called it a coverage bust on that first touchdown, but that's created by the looks that they're presenting, right? And then later in the game, this game was almost bigger. Now, DK dropped a couple. Yeah. And, that's on him, and he's got to own up to that. A couple of big ones. One was on a big 3rd and long that would have been key at the time. And they were perfectly thrown balls by Geno. So Geno could have had his first 400-yard passing game as a pro, and DK could have had just a massive game, because there was a play later. Do you remember the play? I think it was second quarter, where it was second quarter, because it was the first time they gave Christian Haynes some reps. Mm-hmm. He came in for Anthony Bradford, and it was a 3 and out. And on 3rd down, he got absolutely beat by Keon White, who affected the pass.
A monster game as well.
Yep. Hit Geno just as he was throwing. It was, cringed for a moment, because it reminded of the second play of the Broncos game where it led to an interception, where I thought it was going to impact the throw, and it did. But he was trying to hit DK. And if you see the all 22, and I'm going to do a show on it this week, it's DK's wide open for another touchdown. It would have been another 60, 50-yard touchdown. He would have had 2 on the day. He would have probably had 200 yards receiving. Geno would have had 4. It was there to be had. It's just, the offensive line didn't give him time to throw. So just really excited to see what they're doing from an offensive standpoint, especially considering it hasn't all clicked yet.
Yeah, I'm going to throw in one thing before we move on here. One thing I'm really enjoying, and we had a comment, I think, by True Drew Sports as well, about the pre-snap window dressing that we put on almost every single offensive play, just to get those reads on, how that movement is manipulating each level of the opponent's defense before, and also how slowly Geno's approaching the line as well. There you go. Yeah, exactly that point. Geno's absorbing everything, and Geno's such a calm character anyway, but we're putting a calm, composed quarterback in a position where he's getting the maximum amount of defensive information, and then gaining a bit of extra time to make these throws, because we're getting extra time and separation. So I feel like Geno's being put in a position where he's got all the information and a bit of extra time. The only thing to add there is a bit of stability in the O-line, especially in the interior, and I think that's where it really blossoms. So,
and I think that's going to come. And I'm guessing, I haven't seen your guys' talking points, but I'm guessing we're going to talk some more about the offensive line. So we'll get to that.
Probably.
I don't, you know what? I don't actually think I wrote about the offensive line, because I've spoken about them that much. It's
I didn't want to harp on it.
Good, Dad. You've got one more, and then we'll move on. It's Mitch's 4.
Yeah, and this does deal with the offensive line, and this is completely kind of off field, has nothing to do with the game yesterday, just something that caught my eye when they put out the inactives yesterday, and something that I'm a little excited about, because from the moment I saw this young kid play for the first time, I thought, wait a minute, there's something there, and that's Jalen Sundell, the undrafted rookie out of North Dakota State, who the Seahawks signed at the very, very beginning of training camp, very late in the process. He wasn't at the rookie tryouts. He wasn't an original signing. He hadn't signed with anyone else. He was just kind of out there. He just totally slipped through the cracks. And I went to the public scrimmage at Lumen Field, and Grant, Connor Williams wasn't even signed yet. Yeah, he had just been signed, but he obviously wasn't out there yet. So it was Oluwatimi. Nick Harris was still here at the time. Kind of alternating with the ones. And so Sundell came in later and was playing against 2s and 3s, but he just looked like a pro. He looked like he was in total command at center, and he looked much more athletic. He's a guy that I then almost instantly came to like more than Oluwatimi, and I've been bullish on Oluwatimi. I think in the right scheme fit, he's a starter in this league. Yesterday, Oluwatimi was inactive before the game, and Jalen Sundell was the backup to Connor Williams. This fascinates me because Connor Williams still just his second game back off ACL surgery. And so I don't know, where you rate on the chart of like how healthy you think he really is, or how much he's back, or but there has to be some concern. This guy's had 2 ACL tears in his pro career in 5 years. And you're going to go with an undrafted rookie now as his primary backup. I think it speaks to the type of athletic profile they want in their centers or their interior offensive linemen, because when you look at RAS score, especially, Sundell is almost identical to Connor Williams, kind of in frame and build and athletic ability. And it excites me because I think when you look what's happening around the league and the kind of offense Ryan Grubb wants to run, just makes you more multiple in the run game, more versatile. You can get a guy out, pull, get to the second level, but it also kind of opens up an opportunity where if this is the way it's going to be, then maybe Oluwatimi is a guy that has some value to maybe a more of a gap power type run scheme team. Maybe a center goes down to injury over the next month or two, and they could recoup a draft pick for him. It also just indicates an open-mindedness, which we haven't seen in the past. So it was just a tiny little move that I think signals maybe a direction that they're heading personnel-wise, and it really excites me because I think maybe you don't sign Connor Williams in the offseason. If he has a good year, there are other mouths we have to feed. The salary cap is what it is, and they're going to have to manipulate that this offseason. Maybe Williams goes elsewhere. You get a comp pick for him, and Sundell's your guy long term. It's just it was a cool move that I wanted to shine a spotlight on.
Yeah, there's some interesting things with this. I mean, when you look at the versatility of Oluwatimi, it's a guy that there's not been any murmurings at all that Oluwatimi will play guard. So, and because of his size limitations, you couldn't see him moving out and being a backup tackle. But Sundell has played all 3 positions along the line. And when Connor Williams signed with us, he'd specified that he wanted to sign as a pure center and wasn't interested in playing guard. And that might be part of the reason why we rose to the top of the teams that were trying to get his signature, because we told him he could play center with us. So all of a sudden, if you're going to elevate players from the practice squad and try and pick a balanced sort of 10 offensive line players, the guy that can play the entire line and back up a guy who's recently come off a long injury is a great option in comparison to a guy that's just playing center and his backup is just a center. That versatility is really in Sundell's favor for me.
Well, and it's also fascinating because they were signed within days of each other. Right around, I think the Connor Williams, if I remember the timeline right, I think the Connor Williams news had broken, but he hadn't signed his contract. And then he signed it on like a Monday or a Tuesday. And it was the same day or the day after that they made the Sundell move. It was as if they had taken all of the data and all the film and all their evaluations from the OTAs and mini camps and preseason training camp up to that point, and they just came to a concrete determination that Oluwatimi doesn't fit the profile that we want to build around and the kind of center we want in this system. So they went out and double dipped and addressed it with 2 players, and now those are the 2 players at the top of the depth chart.
I wouldn't be opposed to it. Like I said, if it's going to be more that we want an O-line that's more athletic, able to move and sort of,
and they have some more flexibility there. If anyone's worried, exactly. Like, if they were to trade Oluwatimi, then what if Williams goes down now? Sundell, Christian Haynes hasn't ever played center full time, but he played center. They tried him out there. They gave him quite a few reps at the Senior Bowl, and there were actually scouts and teams that viewed him as a guy that could transition to center in the NFL. That could be a natural position for him. So that could be, if you were to move on from Oluwatimi, I would suspect that Haynes would probably be your 3rd emergency center, and they would give him some sort of reps in camp if they needed to.
Well, Dan, you've managed to have an O-line conversation on a podcast with us, and we feel quite privileged. That was positive. I'm desperately listening out for so many, but there are a few, but the majority.
It's kind of who I am, right? I'm always trying to look for, the silver lining and the optimistic points. And the old scouting adage has always stuck with me, that you look for what a player can do and don't focus so much on what he can't do. And then you ask yourself if you think you can develop him around that. And, I see the positive signs of what this offensive line could be moving forward, but it's so hard to convince some fans of that because they just want immediate success. And they just don't understand, some of them, not all of them, that the offensive line group, more than any other position group on the roster on any team, requires some continuity. That these guys were just thrown together within the last couple of weeks. It's going to take some time to play together. And the really good offensive lines in the league don't have 5 All-Pros or even 5 Pro Bowlers across. They all have a weak link or two, but they learn how to work together, and they figure out how to kind of mask those weaknesses and play to their strengths. And I think, people just want to look at the tape and go, Laken Tomlinson sucks. It's never that simple. It's not that simple. And so in the meantime, you got to figure out a way to just get those 5 guys to play together.
Agreed. Mitch, Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Give us your talking points, sir.
I'm going to shake it up from the list I gave you earlier. I'm going to do the
throwing me off now.
The same 4. I'm just going to the fun one. I'm just going to bring up that the word poise is coming up in every single interview and every description of every player's performance for the last, I don't know, since the beginning of preseason. Just poise, 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 poise. So I thought, well, I'm just going to go and check the official definition of the word poise and just see just how well it actually describes the likes of Julian Love. And one of the definitions I found is to be ready and prepared to do something. And I think that you can't really describe a goal line interception in week 1 and a blocked field goal in quarter 4 that then resulted in an overtime win better than that. And then I thought, well, what advice could I give to Mike Mack to shake it up a little bit and use a different word? So I've gone to the thesaurus and I've found some other words for the word poise. And I've got balance, control, gracefulness, presence, composure, which I think is a great one, presence of mind, assurance, and nerve and calmness. I think all of those words pretty much describe quite a few of the players on our defense actually over the first 2 weeks, but Julian Love in particular. So now whenever I hear the word poise, and spoiler, I think we're going to hear it a lot more this season because it's Mike Mack's favorite word. I now understand what he's talking about. And there we go. You all are better educated on the English language.
I was not expecting an English lesson today. Wow.
Every day's a school day, Dan. I mean, for me, it's the fact that you hear that word coming through every single player. So in a press conference, they talk about poise, which means that the coaching, the teaching points coming from Mike Mack and his team are bedding in, which then means that if something as small as that is bedding in, everything else is as well, which means that the rest of the season should be a couple of hiccups, but mainly an upward trajectory. I think we've all said that we just want this to be a huge development season for this team.
I think it reflects the head coach, right? I think what we're seeing is that the players are mirroring, that he's rubbing off on them. And he keeps talking about it. He talked about it again this morning about how they don't talk in terms of we've established our culture and this is what it is. They're still figuring it out day to day and week to week. But from the first minute he arrived, Mike Macdonald you realize right away, he's genuine. He's blunt. He's honest. And I think that's where he differs the most from Pete Carroll. Not to say that Pete was ever disingenuous, but he created such a culture of positivity that there were times that the players on the field looked like they were caught by surprise that they weren't playing well, or they were caught by surprise that they were getting beat physically by another team. And you would see some of those moments within games where the players kind of looked stunned and lost, didn't quite know what to do next. I mean, the worst example of that is the Pittsburgh game last year, which I think was kind of the final nail in the coffin, where they just looked unprepared, uninterested, confused. I haven't seen that for a moment, not in preseason, not with the 2s or 3s on the field even. Like, guys will miss some assignments, and that's not what I'm talking about, but I'm just talking about how they carry themselves and how they approach the next play. Mike, the late great Mike Leach, who coached my alma mater, Washington State University, one of the great coaches, most influential coaches out there, used to always talk about just, one play at a time. Just go on to the next play, one play at a time. We hear Bill Belichick talk about that a lot. I think that's a Harbaugh mentality, and it's rubbed off on Macdonald. And this team we just gave up a 15-yard gain. Let's tee it up for the next one. And that plays into poise and just being sort of a master of your surroundings and of your job. And I think the fact that they didn't put too much on these players' plates initially, that they still haven't installed the entire defense, that they still haven't shown all the looks they can show. They're still holding some cards close to the vest and still kind of playing relatively vanilla, at least on defense, from everything that I read and hear, I think speaks to that.
I like the fact it's not a culture of why I started to dub toxic positivity, where you said everyone was so positive that they thought, oh, we should be winning this. We know we're good enough, but then thinking you're good enough and then backing it up don't bring you the results. You need to think you're good enough and then play like you are, or play like you're not good enough, but striving towards that constantly for the betterment of the team and everyone around you. Yeah. Mitch?
You can get lulled into a false sense of security, by just being told all the time that you're great and everything you're doing is great.
Yeah, it becomes an echo chamber. Yeah. So my next point also ties into coaching, and that's discipline. I think the flags we saw, especially in the first, it felt like it was mainly the first half, to be honest. Some of them were just back-breaking penalties at terrible times. Like the one from Devon Witherspoon, and I'm not going to get on Devon Witherspoon's back because he's been superb and he's been a breath of fresh air since we drafted him. But the one where he shoved the guy unnecessarily after the play on a third down, it's just, I think part of the next level for Devon Witherspoon is harnessing that sort of level of discipline. I just feel like he plays. We saw it last year with the suplex, didn't we? There was where he suplexed the guy, and we all love to see it. Unnecessary, just so unnecessary. So he needs to rein that in a bit. And I think we had a few on the O-line. I think any time where your O-line is struggling, you're going to see some flags. Like there's going to be a bit of holding to avoid Gino taking hits and trying to get away with what you can. But there's still too many big, ill-timed flags for me. And that needs to be coached out, or as much as it can be.
Absolutely.
I agree. I can't even expand on that. I completely agree. It's a young team. It's going to happen, but I do think it's something that does need to be nipped in the bud.
Yeah.
Go on.
I'm going to go on to my next point, which is Dan's kind of touched on it, but I'm going to make a bold statement here and say it might have been Gino's best game for the Seahawks. And I don't mean that in terms of the stat line. I mean, in terms of him looking unlocked, and that's without a steady O-line presence in front of him. Watching him roll out of the pocket, taking first downs with his legs, spreading the ball to every corner of the field, targeting all of his receiving targets. I just thought Gino looks sort of unheld back in this system. He looks like he's fully unleashed. He can perform better in terms of the numbers, but in terms of just an all-round performance, I thought it was really impressive from Gino.
I don't disagree. I think it's hard to look at that tape, and even Coach McDonald this morning said, I didn't see a bad throw on tape, and I don't either, even the incomplete, and he had some drops. Like I said, he would have had statistically his best game by far if he hadn't, especially if Haynes holds up on that one play and it's DK on the long one. But he just seemed in absolute total command, and he really has since the first drive against the Broncos, in total command of that offense, and it fits his skill set perfectly, and he's adapted to even with the issues up front. Offensive line issues are just part of being a Seahawk fan, right? I mean, they've been going on for a long time, but some of our quarterbacks in the past haven't reacted to it the right way. Gino still trusts his pocket, and something clicked last year, and he became so good at maneuvering in the pocket, feeling pressure, and just making those subtle little moves. There was that throw he had, I think it was early first quarter, was it JSN or DK over the middle, where he gets pressure from the right side kind of in his face. He doesn't have to look at it. He just feels it. So he slides backwards. Mina Kimes retweeted this play. He just slides backwards and then so he's not set. His foot's not in the ground. And while he's sort of drifting backwards away from the pressure, throws an absolute dart into a tight window about 25 yards down the field for a completion. It's a throw that not only aren't there many quarterbacks in the NFL that can make, but they won't even see it because they don't even think that it's in their tool belt. Absolutely impressive performance. And one of those performances that should, if you're watching it, if you had any doubts about Geno before, it should give you confidence moving forward that we're going to see more performances like this. Because, look, say what you want about the Patriots year that they had last year, but I think that defense is going to prove to be pretty good over the course of the season.
Yeah, I agree.
Agreed. Go on, Mitch. Hit us with point number 4.
Point number 4 is I felt like special teams held quite a few of the key moments in the game. I thought the punting from our man Michael Dixon was on point again. There's plenty of times that we were 3 and out, but we pinned them into the 10 or 15, which was great to see. He's super consistent, possibly the most consistent player on our roster, honestly. I can't remember a bad game for Michael Dixon. There's the block field goal. You know, there was so many contributions on special teams. Tackling on special teams was great. You didn't see too much getting ripped off on kick returns. It was just a really solid performance. Everyone's talking about Grubb and Aiden Durde and Mike Mack and the new systems we've got. Special teams is being coached really well, I think, by Jay Harbaugh at the moment.
It's always fun to talk about special teams, right? I mean, you take it for granted.
That felt sarcastic.
I wasn't sure if it was sarcasm or not.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason that the Seahawks pay their punter and their kicker what they do. There's a reason they didn't bring in any competition for them in the offseason. It is impressive. I do not understand how come Michael Dixon hasn't even made a Pro Bowl since his rookie year. He was first team All-Pro as a rookie, for crying out loud. His aggregate numbers since then are better. I think he's just so good that people take him for granted. You know, that they'll probably give All-Pro this year to the Bears punter. What, Troy Taylor, is that the kid's name? He's an Australian too, because he was on Hard Knocks and he's such a big story and he's new and Michael Dixon, I think, is the best overall punter in the league. And that punt he had to pin him deep late was huge. D. Williams, I thought, had a much, much better week 2 than in week 1, and showed why the Seahawks have decided to devote an entire roster spot just to him. Had a big return in a big moment there, seemed a lot more sure-handed, and his decisions on punts of when to fair catch inside the 10 were much more sound. So, can't count him out either.
It was nice to see, especially when you think that he has been brought into the squad purely as a kick returner. And obviously he's had the muff. He looked a bit unsure at times as well. He had the one that he let sail behind him. So I think he's looking a bit more assured under that high ball, which means he's able to, first of all, judge where he is and where that ball's going, if he's got the space in front of him to make that run. And I'm waiting for him to break a big one off because we know he can do it. We've seen it in college as well. And it'd be, you know what, Mitch? Mentioning special teams, okay, I'll give you that.
And you know
what's not spoken about enough.
Just one more quick point. We're 2 games into this, and so we're getting a little bit more data. But the way teams are approaching the new kickoff rule, I do wonder if we're going to see some tweaks to that in the offseason, because it seems to me like, at least the Seahawks games I watch, you don't see kickoffs as much on Red Zone or whatever, that teams are willing to give teams an opportunity to return kicks early in games, because, maybe there's a chance they can knock the ball out, right? Get a turnover, flip the field. But when the game's on the line late in the game, teams they're not taking a chance, and they're just kicking it in the end zone or out, and willing to give teams the ball on the 35, knowing that that's a sure thing. So I think if that continues to happen, it sort of, short circuits the whole rule. And I think there's been talk of maybe moving it out to the 40 if that's the case, and maybe that would change some teams' minds, but hasn't really been impactful.
It's not. You've seen so many people just kicking it dead, and it's completely nullifies that. I mean, I think our friend Drew Sports has just put out there as well, the Broncos punter. It's been an absolute tear recently, pinning teams back. We saw it in week 1, and then we saw it again against the Steelers. That is the value of a punter, a good punter. So, yes. Okay, special teams matter.
Value of altitude too. I'm always going to knock Denver punters a little bit because they get to play 8 to 9 games in 6,000 feet elevation. So
yeah, I was going to say you're going to be able to kick the ball a fair distance with that. With that, that's us through the first 8 points. I will rattle through mine because, Dan, if you have time, we do have some questions that have been asked as well.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So my point. So point 9. Offensive checks at the line of scrimmage. I think we glossed over this earlier, but the fact that Gino has been given the freedom by Grubb to go to the line of scrimmage, see what the defense is doing, and he can have 2 calls that he can check to. I think that opened up the DK touchdown, where we got to the line, there was a check, there was some motion, and they didn't know what was happening, which allowed him to just breeze straight past the safety in the cornerback for that touchdown. The more that evolves as well this season, I think we'll see more confusion. The Pats are a really well-drilled defense, and they were countering what we were throwing at them at times, which was evident by some of the PBUs, even the drop catches where they may not be in open space. It's because there was a defender breathing down someone's neck. Although Noah Fant, no excuse for some of those. I think that moving forward, seeing the fluidity of these play calls at the line of scrimmage is going to pay dividends really, really well as we get to the midway point of the season moving forward.
I love the motion, and I started looking this up last night and I got sidetracked, so I still haven't. Do either of you know who the guy doing color on Fox was yesterday? Because he was fantastic, and there were a number of times in the game where he would bring something up and then it would happen. Right before the DK touchdown, he was talking about the matchup with Gonzalez, and they hadn't really exploited that yet. And so, Gonzalez must be doing a good job. But look, they're gonna take shots to DK at some point, and they did. But he talked extensively throughout the game about the motion and the way Grubb uses it. And you go, there it is again. And sometimes, motion back in the old days when I played, and even up through the 80s with the West Coast offense and everything, it was kind of predetermined. It was just part of the play. It was meant for deception, and it would just be one guy going in motion, and that was it. And now it's almost like it's kind of fluid throughout the play, and you'd see players changing direction. You see multiple players going in motion almost on every play to just try and determine whether it's zone or man. And I don't know, man. The more I watch Ryan Grubb coordinate an offense, the smarter I think he is. I think he's really, really good. I think he's really good, guys. I think we got a good one.
I'd like to thank Bryce from the Hawk Zone Rundown. It was Jonathan Vilmer, who's an ex-Saints and Jets linebacker.
He was great. I thought he was really, really insightful. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Bryce. And Jonas as well. You chimed up, and Kenny Albert was there as well. My second point is going to be a bone of contention. Is Charbonnet cut out to be a full-time backup or step in? I throw this in as an incendiary. I think he's a great running back, and I've been on the hype train. I think yesterday wasn't his finest showing, and there's got a lot of people talking. Now, I'd like to say, I'd throw this out purely as a question. I think he's a fantastic running back who brings a lot to this team, and I think he's more of a volume running back when it comes to getting him into the game. He needs to have 20, 30 touches to be able to find his gaps, make sure he's making those big explosive plays and just run through someone enough times where he's going to get free. However, gentlemen, do you think he is an adequate backup to K9?
For me, it's a no. In one way. Sorry to cut you off, Dan. I just wanted to
no, I was
while it's in my head because I'm going to forget. Okay, well, I see this so differently. Charbonnet is a hammer, and Kenny Walker is a saber. Right? Those are two very different weapons for two very different sets of armor that you need to penetrate. Right? So inevitably, if you're missing your saber and you're trying to use your hammer, there's going to be some compatibility issues. And I don't think Charbonnet was ever drafted to be a backup to Ken Walker. He was picked in the draft to be a complement to Ken Walker. One is tenderizing and one is slashing, and we seem to have built a running back room, including Halani on the practice squad, to have adequate backups to Ken Walker and to Charbonnet, but we didn't use Ken Walker's backup yesterday at all. We didn't see. We called up Halani. We didn't use the quicker runner to the outside and scheme him open and throw balls out wide in the flats to running backs. We didn't see Kenny Mack doing anything either. Receiving as a back. No, so we do have replacements for Ken Walker, but none of them are Charbonnet. So in answer to your question, I don't think he can be, and I don't think he was intended to be.
I think he has a very specific style, and you have to put him in a position to succeed. And yesterday was an eye opener for me. I mean, I watched the tape of him coming out of UCLA. I'd have to go back again and look at Chip Kelly's system. Was it, more conducive to him doing what he does well? And was it wider splits? Was there a lot more like counter motion? Was it more outside zone stuff? Charbonnet, if I'm going to, compare him to a past Seahawk quarterback, I think he's more like Sean Alexander than he is, Ken Walker or Marshawn Lynch, where he doesn't have sudden quickness. Like at his size, his athleticism is impressive, but he doesn't have sudden quickness, whereas Ken Walker can get to full speed in 1 or 2 steps. And what they were doing yesterday is they kept running these like, not, almost pistol, but like deep shotgun runs that were slow to develop. And they might have even been at times they were read option type stuff where Geno might pull the ball out. And so by the time he's getting the ball, he's 4 yards deep in the backfield. You can't put all that on him because there just weren't any big holes. And he doesn't have the explosive, sudden quickness to be able to get into a small hole or get outside like Ken Walker does. He can make something out of those plays. And so I don't think they did him any favors. It's the one knock I have on Ryan Grubb yesterday. I think they didn't go away from that soon enough. There were a couple plays late where they got him out in space in the passing game. There was the screen pass that was the absolute perfect call against pressure late in overtime. That was one of the calls of the game. I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see Charbonnet getting out in the flat. We saw the touchdown pass against the Broncos. And so I just don't think he's that dynamic of an inside runner unless there are gaping holes. And so A, run different types of running plays for him, or B, let's at least get a couple reps in there for McIntosh, because I think he showed during the preseason he was the most dynamic runner of the three of, him, Alani, and Charbonnet when Walker's not in there.
That's why I put the point in, just to talk about. And I completely agree with you. I don't think he runs well out the shotgun. I think he needs to be close to the line of scrimmage in order than just to pound it through in between that A and B gap. He can cut outside, so playing in the flats was fantastic. I think yesterday we were still playing a running game for K9 with Charbonnet in there, whereas he, like I said, he hasn't got that sudden quickness and burst, so he can't just jump to the outside and go on like a K9. So agreed. Thank you very much for everyone writing comments in there as well. They are all very, very apt. I'm going to get through my last two, and then we've got a couple of questions that have been asked from our Discord. So trouble over the middle covering tight ends. Hunter Henry became a Rob Gronkowski yesterday, and I'm still trying to work out why. All I can see is the confusion over the middle as to whose assignment it was, trying to play some sort of zone where they just didn't cover that area.
Yeah, that was concerning. It reminded me of, some games in the past where teams would just find something they could pick on, and we just didn't adapt to it. But we did ultimately. And I know I saw some people online that were ripping Julian Love for giving up a couple of those pass plays early. And I haven't watched all 22 yet, but there must have been something maybe in the coverage there where he was the guy in the area, but it just wasn't schemed right for him to be in a good position to make a play, because, he starts off, Brissett goes 7 for his first 7. Henry has 7 catches for 98 yards in the first half. But then there was a point in the game, the second half especially, where they put Love more on Henry exclusively. And after that point, Brissett went 4 for his next 14. So they did find something there. One of the analysts that I follow, can't remember his name, sorry, was saying, called it a big nickel, and that's what we saw that they shifted to, with more of like less Trey Brown, more when I see the snap counts today. I think we'll see this more of Devin Witherspoon on the outside of Tariq Woolen, and then using Julian Love down in the box more to cover the tight ends. We'll see what happens. This week, Miami that's not really their game. But certainly 2 weeks from now, Monday Night Football with Sam Laporta looming, Seahawks are going to have to figure that out.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun one to watch. Hopefully, like I said, with the adjustments that we made in the second half, at least it shows that adaptability, which is something we've not had before in defense. I hope when we play against someone like Sam Laporta, but then you've also got to look at the fact they've got Jameson Williams, they've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Montgomery. I think Gibbs might still be injured for that game, which is a bit of a godsend. But that's a lot of weapons that we're going to try and cover. Mitch, what do you think about the trouble over the middle?
It's painful to see. I can't remember. In fact, I think the last time I felt that sort of bullied over the middle was probably the season opener against the Rams, where Stafford just seemed to be keeping on hitting slot targets, and we just didn't seem to find a way to stop it. However, in this game, as Dan says, we did adjust. And to true Drew Sports' point there, he said it felt like we stopped the stuff to tight ends and ended up giving up more to the running backs. So we lost something in run support in order to bolster over the middle. I think there's a lot of truth in that. But hey, you're never going to stop everything, right? And they're always going to try and pick on something. And it may work for a period of time. It's the show of a good coaching staff if you can adjust to what you're seeing. So,
yeah, and similar to my point I made about Grubb earlier, we're seeing that from McDonald and Dirty in the defense too. They're not waiting till halftime to adjust or sticking stubbornly with what they're doing, thinking, well, we'll just execute. Like we saw it was a back and forth chess match the whole game. New England started bringing in that extra, Caden Wallace, that extra tackle that they had as a jumbo tight end, and going 13 personnel with an extra lineman. So the Seahawks started countering with, they left Hankins on the field more there at the end of the second quarter, especially with Williams and Jay Reed and those guys, and went with some bigger players. I can't wait to sit back and watch the game over again, knowing the outcome, not having to stress about it, because I think it's going to be one of the most fun rewatches, because of all the constant adjustments. This sounds archaic, I know, but there was just so much coaching going on in that game, and between two really young coaching staffs, it was fun to watch.
And that's the thing. I think we'll end up just dissecting so many games this season due to the coaching and how it's been done. I'll get on to the 12th and final talking point, and we've gone over this throughout the pod. Thank you to everyone who's joined in as well. Really appreciate everything that you guys have brought in with the comments. Team mindset, grinding out the win. Now, we've said about the fact there's no more toxic positivity. The guys are showing fantastic poise at all moments in the game. Oh, that sneer on Mitch's face. I think the mindset of this team is something that we haven't seen for quite a few years now, where the guys play for themselves. They don't get too down if a play blows up and they give away points. They keep coming back, and that is the sign of a great team for me. The fact that we're building this 2 games into the season and they're just grinding out wins. There was no letting up, even though we allowed that touchdown in the 4th. We managed to level it up, and then we came back. We stopped their drive in overtime and managed to win it with a field goal. I will be happy this season if we grind out wins like that and show that mindset, even if we lose some narrow ones, but we still show that mindset to keep coming back at people, because that's just going to keep evolving. It's going to keep growing, and it's a culture that will breed within this team and all the rookies and new signings for years to come.
Agree.
Yeah, I mean, a win's a win, but I do think you make a great point that you learn a little bit more about a team with games like this, but also these games are a little bit more valuable when it gets down into December and, the weather starts getting crappy, and you get into playoffs where everyone's more evenly matched, and games come down to one play or another, and you feel like you might be at a disadvantage at a certain point, but you can turn it around. And, we've seen tons and tons of comeback wins over the years from the Seahawks, but they were more along the lines of, like, they just seemed lost for a half or 3 quarters, and then something clicked and they figured out, and they just, just took the reins off and just let everything hang out. I thought that this was more along the lines of just kind of this constant battle throughout the game to figure out how to succeed. And it was just push-pull the whole game, and they ended up coming out on top because they had the best quarterback on the field that day.
Yeah. It's so nice to see. It's so nice to say that as well. Mitch, would you like to say anything about the mindset before we hit the questions? Because Dan is a very busy man and he's got another podcast that he's going to be doing today. So for those
hours from now.
Hours, oh, fine, that's all right. We're going to keep you. We're going to keep you hostage for a little bit then.
No, I haven't really got anything to add, but I definitely agree with all the points you've made. I completely concur.
Oh, thank you. That makes a change.
Who knew you guys knew what you were talking about, eh?
That would never fly on ESPN. That's too boring. You guys.
It's because you're here, Dan. Usually
they hate each other a little bit more. You get more ratings. Be mean to each other. Yeah,
I'm not got it in me. So, for those who just joined in for the first time, thank you very much. We do have a Discord channel, and these that we put down as your questions are questions from the Discord. It is our pinned post on X. You can find it on our Instagram and our Facebook, everything. But we like to give members of the Discord an opportunity to ask questions to ourselves and our guests in preparation, because there's so many flooding in that we can't get to all of them. So I do apologise. We will try and get to those after, or if we've got time today. So here's a few. Gary, our good friend Gary, another close win. Are we feeling confident about our pre-season win predictions? Dan, I don't think you did the predictions, did you? Did you give a
not with you guys? And I didn't do a game by game breakdown this year, just because there were so many unknowns. I thought that was kind of a exercise in futility. But I did say, I have said on the record, this feels like an 11-win team to me. And it still does, more so now, I think, because of the way that they've been playing. And to Gary's point, though, he says these were meant to be easy wins. I never, ever adopt that philosophy. This is the NFL. This is the NFL. And unless you're playing Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers, there are no such thing as easy wins. And I think we will see as the season goes along. Yeah, I don't think Denver's going to be very good, but I think New England might be. And I think that's going to bear itself out over time, that maybe that offensive performance we saw yesterday to grit through that and get a win is going to be more impressive when we look back and see what New England does to other teams defensively as well.
Mitch, did we say 11-6 or 10-7? I have to go back on that and check. I've got a notepad somewhere as well.
I had it close. I had us with a winning record, but not by any huge stretch. Yeah,
I think we were 10-6. I'll recheck and I'll post it at some point. Bryce, our good friend from the Hawks on Rundown. If you guys who are watching haven't subscribed to them, give Bryce and Ryan a sub. Our friend here, Dan, will be with them later on today.
Indeed.
So I will be hopefully watching that through one very tired eye, or I'll be catching it in the morning whilst I'm doing some work. But how much longer do you think they keep the guard tandem going? And how much of an impact is Brown's blocking ability being missed in the run game? Because I think it's actually a big missing link right now.
It's funny. I just saw a tweet today from someone who covers the Arizona Cardinals talking about how Evan Brown was one of their, best free agent signings, and that he's been his PFF grades in the mid-70s overall, and he's been a really solid player for them at guard, which when we signed him was supposed to have been his weaker position between that and center. I don't know if it's Brown specifically as much as, again, this is the first time these three players have ever played together, right? And Connor Williams, I don't know if he's not 100% healthy, but it's going to take some time. He got beat a couple times yesterday. Didn't grade out very well in PFF after being a top 5 center the last couple of years. So I do think that's going to take some time. The question to me isn't if, it's when is Christian Haynes going to start? Now, McDonald said on his coach's show today, look for him to get even more reps. And I think he even used the word rotation with Anthony Bradford at right guard. I would like at some point for them to consider maybe giving him some reps at left guard. I thought he played exceptionally well there in the preseason, even though he'd never played it in college. And I suspect when I go back and look at the full game replay on all 22, I'm going to see more bad reps from Laken Tomlinson yesterday than Anthony Bradford. And there were times, especially that last preseason game against the Browns, where they had Haynes at left guard and Bradford at right guard. And I thought maybe that was our best combo. So I do think at some point Haynes is going to be in there. It's just a matter of time. These guys, they have to improve. I mean, Tomlinson had some horrible reps yesterday. I think more so than Bradford.
He's had a few. So Bryce would just like to apologize. I meant Pharaoh Brown, the tight end.
I was talking about Evan Brown. It was because I saw that tweet this morning that the Cardinals really like what he's doing. Yeah, maybe. I thought I was really impressed with AJ Barner as a blocker week 1. I think they pointed out on the telecast yesterday there were a couple of things that he missed, but he's not Farrell Brown. We haven't seen that yet, so I honestly don't know what kind of impact he's going to have on this offense because we haven't seen him yet. But I'm excited to do so. Hopefully this week.
Well, hopefully. So the next 3 comments and questions from Gary again. He's a very active member, and we do appreciate him because he's got some fantastic insight as a very, very long-time supporter of the Seahawks. He's happy with defensive play. I think we might have answered a few of these, although there's a lot of room for improvement. What are your thoughts on how the offense has played? I feel pretty good, bearing in mind that I thought the O-line was our weakness, and unfortunately it's proven to be the case. So I think we've addressed that. We're happy with this offense. It's going to keep maturing. It's one of those that's going to keep maturing. It's going to keep building. The more they install, the more familiar they get. The O-line as well, as Dan's just said, I think the more they play together, when we find those right combinations, will not be an issue for us.
And I think one thing this offense will do at some point that we're not used to seeing here in Seattle is because of Ryan Grubb's mentality, something he's shown at every stop along the way, working his way up through the college ranks. There will be a couple of those games this year where everything clicks and they pour it on. Because unlike some last offensive coordinators here, he doesn't play it close to the vest. Once he finds a matchup he can exploit and is successful in doing so, he will continue to go to it over and over. I can tell you because I saw it firsthand when he was at UW against my Cougars, and Michael Penix 2 years ago in the Apple Cup found some mismatches in the secondary, and just it was bombs away. It was just we couldn't get out of the way of his deep passes. It was unbelievable, and I think we'll have games like that where everything will click, and the offense will have really, really productive days and prolific days even. And I would argue that, you look what they did yesterday with 0 running game and the game that Geno had, and then 2 receivers going over 10 catches and 100 yards. That's spectacular.
Could you imagine that the last 2 seasons?
No, because it was almost like they would start games. It was almost like they waited. Like it just, how many games have we had over the last few years? 2 years ago, I think of the game at the Chargers, where they got out to a fast start on offense, had a 17-0 lead in the second quarter. There were a couple of long touchdowns there. Geno was ripping it, and then they take their foot off the gas and let the other team back into it. I don't think that's going to happen. I think games like that where they start fast, they're just going to keep pushing.
I think that speaks to the next point. Our thoughts on Grubb's play calling and schemes to date. I think it is going to be a matter of once they gel, he's going to put his foot on the throat and he's just going to keep going. And that's what I want to see. I want to see some ruthless play calling where he will pick on players and he'll pick on matchups, and we will just see points and yards pouring. Finally, from Gary, thoughts on the new coaching staff today? Well, Mitch and Dan, I'll let you take this. I wax lyrical about them enough.
You go, Dan.
Just how can you not be impressed is I guess the easiest way to answer that. Just the way that they've handled everything that goes into the job. Just, it's Mike McDonald has kind of opened the curtain and let us in. He's been pretty honest talking about his process and how, he even spoke a few weeks ago about learning to figure out how to call a game while also administering to being a head coach and managing those other points of the operation. But Ryan Grubb's the same thing. We haven't heard a lot from the other coaches. Dirty has talked a little bit, but they just all seem to be guys that are very, very cognitive is the word that I come up with. Just very
great way to describe them.
Very thoughtful, and there's so much brain power in that room. I think John Schneider said after he hired McDonald, he had a big brain. I think they all do. And they're just a very, very smart group of coaches who are open-minded and don't think they have all the answers. And they continue as they move along. McDonald talked today about Grubb and how willing he is in practice. I think this is the best example of this. to try new things against their defense and then ask questions like, how do you think this worked? What if we tried this? What are you doing to us there? What would you do if I did this? And I don't know that that's existed in the past. If it has, on a teaching level, kind of behind the scenes, we didn't see it translate to game day on Sunday, but we're hearing them talk about that process, and then we're seeing some of the results on game day, which I think is all you can hope for. I think the ceiling for this coaching staff is unlimited.
I agree.
Nice.
Mitch?
Yeah, I mentioned this earlier, and I think it's my key point really on the coaching staff. I'm just enjoying being able to watch a coaching staff that are able to adapt and able to screw up the whatever the game plan was and reimagine it at halftime, and based on what they've seen in the first half, we just keep seeing adaptations on the fly, and that's so refreshing compared to what we've seen in recent times. That's my big.
I don't know if you guys saw, there was a shot during the telecast of Grubb in his coach's box, kind of looking at his play sheet, was all laid out in front of him, and he was looking at stuff. Did you guys see that shot at all that I'm talking about? Is it just me, or did that play sheet seem 10 times bigger than anyone else?
Yeah, it was huge.
And maybe that's the reason he prefers to be in the box and not on the sidelines like some guys. Like, even
be holding it like an old school newspaper. Like
a guy like, I think, Josh McDaniel, who was until the last 2 years known as one of the bright offensive minds in the league. And it's double-sided, but it's maybe as big as this computer screen. He fits it all on there. I'm like, there's more volume there. It seemed like to me, like just the options. I don't even think that the TV screen captured it all. I think it was continuing to just go
just panoramic. That's
like 9 pages of stuff.
So, this is for me, and before we move on to the next bit, when it comes to the coaching staff. So, Gary, to answer yours, what's nice for me as a sports coach is to see coaches coaching and coaching well. The majority of this team were the same team we had last season, but the way they're being coached now, Mitch, I'm dropping it in there. Tackling, they practice tackling every week. I have to put it in every pod. The fact that they are fully attuned with what is required of them, with what the fellow players are doing. The fact that every lesson that's being taught about the defense, the offense, their individual skill sets is actually being taken on board, and these players are improving, for me, is the sign of a great coaching staff. So.
Yeah, and I like that also. I don't know if you saw this. I think maybe you didn't, because it was shortly before we went on. Again, from McDonald's Coaches Show this morning, where he was talking about the use of analytics and how it plays into fourth down decisions and whether to kick or go and those types of things. And he talked so openly and honestly about the push and pull and the balance between your head and your heart and using those analytics. And he did say that at the end of regulation, the decision to kick the field goal and play for overtime instead of go for it, he said the analytics slightly favored going for it there. But that's where he brought, all the rest of his skill set and mindset into it. Like, we were unsuccessful a couple of times on short yardage today. They're beating us in that area of the game. It limits what we can do. Our play calls will be limited. So let's just kick it. And I feel good about, moving forward and what we're doing on defense. We can stop them and go from there. That kind of thought process, and how it's a humble thought process. They don't feel like they have all the answers. There isn't any arrogance there. There's confidence in their process, but not arrogance, and they're open to all possibilities. And I think whatever you do, teaching, counseling, coaching, that's a great skill.
I completely agree. I just love the fact that all of the Seahawks fans are on the same page with this coaching staff now. It's just so refreshing to see. We've got one last question from the Discord. This is from Leo, who trying to keep it positive, but then Leo gets in the chat. Starting the season 2-0 is great, but my concerns have been: 1, one-score win that could have gone either way. 2, lost the time of possession on both games. 3, we didn't see any improvements regarding the penalties. Total of 12 so far, 6 in each game. I'm not sure how we'll be able to fix those things. I think the time of possession could be fixed if we're able to establish the run, but the O-line has been an issue. What are our thoughts? It's the O-line propping up again. Dan, you brought us up here with the positive O-line talk, but the general consensus of the O-line just brings it down, and it is a bone of contention, and I completely understand it. We've gone over it quite a few times on this pod. Yeah. All I'd say to anyone is give it time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the positive spin on this is they've won 2 games and they're 2-0 in first place despite those limitations. They didn't let those limitations beat them. They didn't let them result in losses. They found ways to overcome them, and we've seen a progression now through 8 and a half quarters that it is getting better and trending in the right direction. And you can play that game the other way too. I mean, that Broncos game could have been a 30-point blowout if we don't take 2 safeties, if D. Williams doesn't muff a punt, if Geno Smith doesn't get hit while he's trying to throw and throws an interception. If the game yesterday could have been a much easier win if again, to his point with the offensive line, but if Geno has another split second to throw that other deep ball to DK, or if a couple of receivers catch their passes, it's you can always twist those things either way, right? But I tend to look at the positive until they prove, unless we reach a point where it just becomes unmanageable up front on offense and teams just figure out how to exploit it and we don't have any other answers on the roster. I'm seeing the progression, and it's a position group I did not ever expect under any circumstances to come out and play like a top 10 unit in the league from week 1. That's just not going to happen. So ask me again in 6 weeks how I feel about the offensive line. I expect them to be better.
It's such a young unit as well. Around the league, you won't find a younger offensive line unit than the one we've got. So that automatically means it's a high ceiling and teething problems. And like you said, you mentioned it earlier on the pod, those 3 in the interior of the O-line hadn't played an NFL snap together until week 1. And it looked like that in week 1. It was better this week, but still not great. So there is some progression there, I think. So yeah,
focus on. I would tell the people that are concerned is find positive reps and focus on those. There was a moment when Keon White was killing us, and that's when they went to Christian Haynes at right guard, and he had a couple of really positive reps in the run game on 1st and 2nd down. Then 3rd down, he got blown away by Keon White, and that led to the incompletion I talked about that should have been a deep shot to DK. So they went right back to Anthony Bradford on the next series, and Anthony Bradford completely dominated Keon White in that series. There's one play where he shoves him 5 yards downfield and buries him into the turf and gets up and gets in his face. He was inspired by being benched for a series, no doubt. But, I've never subscribed to the mentality that a player is good or bad. And I hate the term sucks. I just hate it. Maybe is Laken Tomlinson not the player he used to be? Obviously. Is he not viable as a 17-game starter? Probably, and they need to address that at some point. But Anthony Bradford shows you something every game to make you think he could be the answer. And again, he was one of the youngest offensive linemen at his position in the draft last year. It's just his 2nd year in the league. So let's not give up on that guy yet.
Yeah, agreed. Just very quickly, just to answer this, time in possession. So what was our time in possession? Week 1 was 28 minutes and 46 seconds. Week 2, it was 29 minutes 41. So it's close enough to 50-50. It's not like we were so far behind in the time in possession that the game just escaped us. The time in possession was close, and we still won the game, whether we were in positive or negative. Let's take the positives, that even though we weren't winning the time in possession, we won the games.
And I think that'll continue to turn as the offensive line gets better, but also, they haven't installed their full defense yet. And again, we heard yesterday that, Griffin Sturgeon was talking about this a lot on his Twitter feed today already. And after looking at some cut-ups that Mike McDonald hasn't yet quite shown his full hand when it comes to twists and stunts and sim pressures on 1st and 2nd down that he did when he was in Baltimore. He's showing it on 3rd down and obvious passing downs. He's unloading the playbook there, but he hasn't quite peeled all of the curtain back on his full scheme. And so we haven't seen a lot of turnovers. We haven't seen balls being knocked out. Really, we saw a couple week one. We didn't see any yesterday. We haven't seen those real disruptive plays. They're getting the quarterback, but they're not getting him to the ground. A couple of those plays go our way, and we just start finishing plays, and all of a sudden that makes a dramatic difference in time of possession. So I think we're going to see that shift.
I think going forward, I think we'll be fine. It's one of those wait and see. It's a young team. It's a new coaching staff. It's a brand new era for Seahawks football. And I think everyone just needs to take everything with a little pinch of salt right now. Hold your horses and just watch how it all unfolds, whether this is a playoff season or this is a building season. It's going to be an exciting season. Speaking of exciting seasons, Dan, what have you got coming up?
Stuff.
Some things.
I've got a Dolphins content creator joining me on Wednesday morning, so we'll get that up probably Thursday. Really excited about it, and looking ahead to that game. And then right now, just before I was on air with you guys today, I was doing some screen captures of every target for DK Metcalf in the game yesterday, and going to do a film breakdown on that. That'll probably be up on the channel tomorrow. Just looking at how he was used, what kind of routes he ran, some missed opportunities, and also how he came up big down the stretch, as he always tends to. So focus a little bit on DK on the show this week.
Excellent. Nice. So for anyone that doesn't know, this is Dan Viens. Am I putting the right way, Mitch? This is a common thing on our pod. It always goes the wrong way. Dan Viens, Seahawks Forever. You can catch him on. You can get it the right way first time. Every single time someone will watch this and you'll see me point something. But you've got it easy. You can just point anyway. So Dan Viens, they can find you. What are your tags on socials, Dan? For those who don't know,
at Seahawks Forever on Twitter. That's really all I use associated with the show at this point. And then Seahawks Forever with Dan Viens, the YouTube channel. Subscribe and follow along there.
Awesome. And we've been the 12 Talk podcast. Thank you to everyone who's joined us. If you're a first-time watcher or listener, by all means, like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, jump in our Discord. We would love to have you. We are coming out every single week with a guest, either a Seahawks podcaster, media personality, or you, a 12. If you want to appear, slide into our DMs. We would love to arrange to have you review a game with us. But until next time, until Dan is back on air very soon, and I will be watching. Can't wait. I just want to finish this with a Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
I'll do a Go Hawks too. Always good to join you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, man. Bye.